Welcome to the Inland Valley Storytellers Monthly Story Swap. I'm John St. Clair, and I'm your Zoom host, and I'm the leader of the Inland Valley Storytellers, and we have 4 people here at the Claremont Forum, and we have 1 person remotely from Riverside, that being Walter Roth. So, who would like to tell a story first?
I would.
Good. Okay, so do you want to do it sitting or standing?
I don't know.
Normally, if you're here, we have you stand and we do it like this.
So I can be back here.
Yeah.
But if you'd like to sit down, you can have the chair.
I've been practicing standing.
There you go.
Okay, look to see if you're in the window there.
I am there. Okay, I should just begin with my story. It's 1967, New York City. Bob and I have been living together for a few years, and we've begun to hear a lot of things about what's happening in San Francisco. We hear about a group called the Diggers, and there's something called a Free Store. And someone comes back with a record album from a group called the Grateful Dead. And Bob says he thinks we ought to go out to California and see what's going on there. So we decide that we'll do that. We've been living together for a couple of years, so it's not unusual for us to plan that. We buy an old van and fix it up so we can sleep inside. And we're going to bring his 2 children along with us. His daughter's about 6 and his son is maybe 4 and a half. And we decide we're going to get married before we make this trip. So we get the blood tests that were needed and we get a marriage license. And our plan is just to go to City Hall in New York City to get married. And his children and another friend are going to come with us as witnesses. And his daughter has a little bouquet of flowers that she's carrying. So we go to City Hall and we find the room where they do marriage ceremonies. And I don't think I've told you yet that Bob has long hair. And in 1967, that was very unusual for men to have long hair. We find the room where they perform marriage ceremonies, show them our marriage certificate, our license, and the man in charge refuses. He says he will not marry us. And we ask why, and he says, because Bob is not wearing a jacket and a tie, so he will not perform the marriage ceremony. So Bob asks other men in that room, would they lend him a jacket and a tie, and they all say no. So we leave, we're not getting married in New York City. And we decide though to get started on our trip. And we head up to upstate New York, where some friends are starting a commune. And this was an interesting time, 1967. All these people who grew up in cities all have decided they want to go back to the land. And that was what everyone was saying. So we stay there for a couple of weeks, and then we take off with the 2 children in our van. And as we're driving through upstate New York, I see a sign on the road that says Justice of the Peace. And I've seen enough old movies to know that a Justice of the Peace can perform a wedding ceremony. So our license, since we're still in New York State, our license is still good. So we pull in there. He doesn't care that Bob isn't wearing a jacket or a tie or has long hair, or that I have long hair, and we've got 2 children with us. And his wife and a neighbor come, and they're the witnesses, and we end up getting married. And we head across the country to San Francisco. So now we'll fast forward about 7 years. And Bob and I are both living in Minneapolis, but we're not together anymore. The marriage just really didn't work. But our daughter is living with me. And I decide that I want to buy a house. And when I go to speak with the lawyer to finalize everything, he says, you know, because you're still legally married, your husband actually could put a claim for part of that house, even though he had nothing to do with buying it. So I think about it and decide this marriage is never going to work, so we will get a divorce. And I have a friend who knows a friend who's a lawyer, and I get the paperwork and fill out the paperwork that I need for a divorce and schedule a time to go to court. And my daughter says she wants to come with me. She wants to see what happens. So she and a friend will come with me to court. And then she asks me a question that's kind of a surprise. She says, do people wear the same thing when they get divorced that they wore when they got married? And I think about it, and then I go to the closet, and there is that dress that I wore when we stopped at the Justice of the Peace. And then I can answer her question. Yes, sometimes people do wear the same thing when they get divorced that they wore when they got married, because that's what I did.
Thank you, Ina. That was great.
My first time.
Yeah, your first story. That was great. Very well.
Thank you.
Ah, we have John here too. We got another Zoom. Now I can do the spotlight.
Oh, really?
Hey, John, how you doing? Hey, everybody.
Hi, John. Did you catch any of that story?
Just the last minute or two, unfortunately. I was having trouble logging on.
Ah, okay. So, who wants to be next to tell a story? Walter, do you have one? Okay.
I have a story.
Okay, let me get you on. I should be able to do spotlight now. Yep. And I'm gonna turn this chair around so we can see you. There we go.
Okay, this is, I would say, a folk tale. I don't know where it came from. After I'm done telling it, I'll tell you how I got a hold of it, and you'll probably get a laugh out of that. Long ago, in faraway Persia, in the barren deserts, up against a rocky mountain, was a little village called Darya. And outside that village was a man named Omar, the stonecutter. He lived alone because he was getting on in years. His wife had died, and his children had moved away to more prosperous areas. But still, he made a little living out of cutting stone for the village of Darya. But because the village had been established for many years, there wasn't a lot of work to do. Well, one day, he was drinking tea in the front of his house, and some men came up on horses. This was Mohammed. He was the most prominent man in the village, and he was considered to be the leader. He owned property. He was the kind of man that when he spoke, people listened. Omar got up from his chair and said, "Yes, what can I do for you?" And Mohammed said, "I need some stone cut. My daughter is getting married, and I'm expanding my house. I need you to begin work immediately." And this was a blistering hot day. The sun shone down mercilessly on them. The horses were sweating and nervous. And Mohammed's men said, "Please, Mohammed, can we go back? It's very hot." And they said, yes, and they rushed off back to home. So Omar went back and got his hammer and his tools for stone cutting and slowly walked out to the quarry that was behind his house. As he was working, he began to think. Now, Omar was not an educated man, but it doesn't mean he wasn't bright. And he had an active imagination and was even, you might call, something of an armchair philosopher. So as he worked, he kept his mind occupied by just thinking about things. And the first thing he thought of was how nice it would be to be the most powerful man in the village, somebody who gave orders and didn't receive orders. And as he worked, he looked up at that sun that was so hot, and he thought, you know, he may be the most powerful man in our village, but the sun is more powerful than him, because the sun made him run for cover. And as he mused on this, he noticed a large, dark cloud being blown across the sky. And as it blew, it blotted out the sun. And for a moment, he was in the shade. And he thought, well, now that's funny. The cloud appears to be more powerful than the sun, because the cloud can blot out the sun. And as he watched the cloud thinking about this, he saw it blow up against the mountain that he was working on. And of course, the cloud had to climb up and up over the mountain because it certainly couldn't go through it. And he thought, well, what do you know? It appears that the mountain is more powerful than the cloud, because the cloud has to give way to the mountain. And then as he thought about this, he looked at the base of the mountain off in the distance, and he saw something moving, a small figure. He recognized it as being the stonecutter from a neighboring village. And then he thought, my goodness, given enough time, a stonecutter can take down a mountain. So just maybe a stonecutter is the most powerful thing in the world.
All
That's
right.
it. And I said I would tell you where I got the story. And there used to be a TV show on when I was in college called Kung Fu. I don't know if anybody remembers that crazy show. But on that show, he told this story using shadow puppets. And at the time, I was taking children's literature, and we were supposed to create a book. And I chose to take that story and make a little book out of it. So that was my class project. And that's where the story came from.
All right. Great. Well, thank you for the story and the backstory. All right, I'll take the spotlight off, Walter. All right, who wants to be next?
Oh, I could do one.
Okay, let's turn this around and put the spotlight on this.
Walter, I like your t-shirt there, Zion National Park. My wife and I were just there about 2 months ago. It's really fantastic.
Okay.
Now, I was looking through my folktale collection
Oh, I have that
recently
book.
and remembered that this was one of my absolute favorites when I first started storytelling. Because back then, this book had just come out, and Jane Yolen was already a favorite author of mine. And I hadn't thought about the fact that she had taken a lot of folkloric themes, but she actually put together a collection of stories from all over the world. It wasn't until recently that I looked where she got this particular story, because it was something that I really hadn't noticed anywhere else. And it turns out she got it from Catherine Briggs, but I haven't been able to find out where Catherine Briggs got it. Catherine Briggs being the notable modern collector of British Isles folklore. But anyway, now to most folks, Long Lytton was not a place worthy of note. I mean, yes, it was noteworthy to people in Nether Lytton, just to the north and east, but that's about as far as their fame went, which you would think would be unusual because they, in fact, had 3 magic wells in the forest near town. They just didn't talk about them a lot because, you know, there are magic wells all over the British Isles, and these were not very powerful in their magic. I mean, if you were a stone cutter or a wood cutter or a shepherd and you got aches and pains at the end of the day, you'd walk over to one of the 3 wells and drink a little bit of the water, and your aches and pains would go away. That seemed to be the extent of the power of the wells. So they didn't talk about it much. They weren't very famous. People came and went, except for the dragon. The dragon came and did not leave. For it was one day that a dragon came to Long Lytton and into the forest there. And apparently it decided to claim the 3 wells in the forest. Well, that was mostly upsetting to the folks who went there to have their aches and pains cured, but the fact was there was a dragon in the forest. And it wasn't one of those big famous ones, the kind that go around eating princesses and devastating the countryside. Sure, once in a while a sheep would go missing and they figured that the dragon had eaten it, but it was life when you live in a place like that. The problem was that it was becoming a chore because this dragon thought it was funny and used its magic to turn invisible from time to time. And so if you were going through the forest and got too near the wells, you didn't see or hear the dragon. And then behind you, there would be a, and you'd turn around and poof, there would appear the dragon. And you'd run screaming off because a dragon had appeared right next to you, and the dragon would go quietly back to the wells and laugh to itself. But after a while, just because there were people who had mentioned the magic healing wells in Long Lytton, and you know, word gets out. And if you're a knight and you've had aches and pains and you've heard about a magic well that could heal your aches and pains, so it was a knight came to Long Lytton to be healed. He went to the folks and said, "Where are the magic wells?" And they said, "The dragon has them." "A dragon? There's a dragon here and you never sent for anybody to do anything about it?" Well, who's going to come to Long Lytton to take care of the dragon? I mean, there's no knights in Nether Lytton, and that's the closest place. And the dragon slaying potential knight thought about it and said, I'll have to go see if I can deal with this dragon. Now, as it happened, this knight in his travels around the world had accumulated experience with slaying beasts. But more importantly, he had learned of things having to do with magic, for the folks told him about them, the dragon turning invisible. He happened to have acquired a salve that could negate magic that would fool the eyes. And so when he went hunting the dragon, he rubbed that on his eyelids so that the dragon wouldn't be able to turn invisible and fool him. And he went into the forest, just wandering through as if nothing could bother him, and went to where the wells were. And sure enough, there was a dragon, kind of wrapped around one of the wells. So there's a dragon there after all. I thought they were making it up, that it might be some great worm or something, but no, that's a dragon. Well, it hasn't breathed fire, or else it would burn the forest down. So its powers must be something else. But that invisibility can't fool me. I should be able to kill it. And so he drew his sword and went wandering in the direction of the wells. "Dragon, oh dragon, come out," as if he couldn't see where it was. And the dragon tiptoed as well as dragons could in the direction of the knight. Now, even a dragon being quiet leaves quite a depression in the leaves of the forest, so he could see exactly where it was, even if he couldn't see the invisible dragon. But as it got close to him, the knight whipped his sword around and clang, bashed it on the nose. Ah! The knight could see it. Ooh. And they got into a fight. But the dragon stayed near the wells. And even though they fought and fought and fought and fought, and the dragon never laid a tooth or a fang on the knight, the dragon kept getting better. And the knight couldn't see how that was happening. It wasn't going over and drinking the healing water. And they fought and they fought and they fought the rest of the day. By the end of the day, the dragon looked barely the worse for the wear. And the knight was really tired. He went back to the town and said, I fought the dragon all day, but I don't seem to have been able to slay him. There must be something else going on. Well, he rested himself and refreshed himself, and the next day went on out to the dragon again, and again they fought all day and both survived. Well, now the knight was puzzled. There must be some trick the dragon was using. And so the third day, instead of rushing out to fight the dragon, he sneaked up. Now, a knight in the forest isn't all that quiet either, but he doesn't leave the big depressions in the ground, and at least he can hide behind individual trees and get a close look. And as he got a close look, he could see why the dragon was staying close to the wells. Because in the midst of their battles, he realized the dragon had always kept his back to one of the wells. And as he sneaked up from a different angle, he saw that the dragon had his tail draped over the edge of the well. So that all day as they fought, the dragon had his tail in the healing waters. And perhaps it's the magic of a dragon that makes the well even stronger, but he was healing as quickly as he was damaged. So the knight thought, he's being tricky, so I have to be tricky in order to beat him. And so for their third battle, he came into the fight looking as if he hadn't even fully recovered from the previous day. And he didn't rush up to the dragon, but stood back from it, waving his sword as if he could barely stand. And the dragon, being a dragon, was overconfident and leapt forward to see if he could finish off this pesky knight. And they fought, and they fought. And the dragon forgot to keep his tail in the well because the knight had stood farther back for this battle. And by the time the dragon realized, oh no, the water, the wells, and tried to turn and go back to the water, the knight took that opportunity to slay the dragon. Now, you would think that this would have been a famous dragon slaying, but the fact was that this was still Long Lytton and it wasn't a famous place. But at least the knight got to heal his own injuries, and the shepherds and the woodcutters and the stone cutters of Long Lytton got to heal their own aches and pains a bit more than before. And if there was ever another dragon that came to bother that village, no one talked about it, but then no one talks about much in Long Lytton.
Thank you, Nick. That was great. Yeah, I have that book too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes.
It's definitely a classic. Jane Yolen is one of the most prolific American writers, and she has written or edited hundreds of volumes of fiction and stories and poetry and what have you.
Oh, we have somebody coming in the back door.
Oh,
Hello. Okay, so John, do you have a story to share tonight? No. Okay, I guess I'll be the next storyteller. And the story I'm going to tell, oops, let me get the mouse arrow off the screen, is a children's story written by William Steig. Now, I don't know if you've heard of William Steig before, but he won I don't know if it was a Caldecott Award or some other award for Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. It was a very famous book, children's story he wrote. He also happened to write the book called Shrek, which was made into a movie. But the story I'm going to tell is called Dr. DeSoto. Dr. DeSoto was a very good dentist. He also happened to be a mouse. And because he was a mouse, he had a very small dentist chair, which was just the right size for moles and chipmunks and squirrels. If there were bigger animals like pigs, he would bring over a ladder to climb up to reach the mouth. Really big animals like horses and cows, Dr. DeSoto would put a harness on, and there was a rope tied onto the harness that went up to the ceiling. There was a pulley, and it came down to a winch. And his wife, who was his assistant, would crank the winch and raise Dr. DeSoto up to the horse or the cow's mouth, and then he would step in the mouth to do the work, wearing rubber booties on his feet to keep his feet dry. Well, there were some animals that Dr. DeSoto would not treat. He would not treat cats. He would not treat foxes. He would not treat anything that might be dangerous to a mouse. And his sign said that. He had a big sign out in front that said, Dr. DeSoto, dentist, cats and other dangerous animals will not be treated. Now, in order to keep his office safe, the door was always locked. But he had a 2-story building. And if a prospective customer came to the door, they would ring the doorbell, and Dr. DeSoto would be upstairs, and he would look out the window down to see who was there, and not even the most timid-looking cat would be allowed to come in. But if it looked like a safe customer, he'd push a button, it would unlock the door, and the customer would come upstairs to Dr. DeSoto's room where he did his work. Well, one day, the doorbell rang, and Dr. DeSoto and Mrs. DeSoto went over to the window, and they looked down, and there was a well-dressed fox. And the fox had a bandana wrapped around his head and his mouth, and he was holding one side of his head, and he was moaning and groaning. And Dr. DeSoto called out, sir, didn't you see my sign? I can't let you in, sir. And the fox said, please. He got down on his hands and knees. Please help me. I have a rotten tooth in it. The pain is killing me. Please. Well, Dr. DeSoto wasn't sure what to do, and he looked at his wife and said, what do you think? And she said, well, he's really in pain. Surely he wouldn't harm us if we help him. And so Dr. DeSoto agreed. He pushed the button to unlock the door, and the fox came running up the stairs and said, thank you. Please do something to end this pain. And so Dr. DeSoto said, okay, sit down on the floor. And Dr. DeSoto brought over a ladder, which was high enough to reach the fox's mouth. He climbed up the ladder and he said, take off the bandage and open your mouth. So the fox took off the bandana that was around his head, and he opened his mouth. And the dentist, Dr. DeSoto, stepped into his mouth, and he said, oh man, that's awful. Because not only was there a very rotten tooth, but the fox had very bad breath too. And so he stepped back out and he said, you definitely have an infection there. That tooth has to be pulled out. I can do that. I can extract the tooth and make a gold tooth to go in its place so you'll still be able to eat correctly. And the fox said, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please do anything to end this pain. And so Dr. DeSoto said, okay, you'll have to come back tomorrow to get the new tooth, but I will extract the painful tooth today, and that should end most of the pain. So Dr. DeSoto got what he needed together, and he climbed up the ladder, and he said, I'm going to have to put you under so you don't feel the tooth being extracted. So close your mouth. I'm going to put this over your nose and take some deep breaths. So he put the gas mask on the fox, and the fox took a couple deep breaths, and soon he was totally out, totally asleep. And so Dr. DeSoto opened his mouth, the fox's mouth, and he put a stick in to keep it propped open and began to work. And as he was working, the fox was dreaming and sort of mumbling something, and he could hear what he said. The fox said, oh, how I like them raw, with just a pinch of salt and a fine white wine. And Dr. DeSoto got chills going down his spine because he thought that the fox knew he was in the mouth and was dreaming about eating Dr. DeSoto. So Dr. DeSoto put the clamp on the tooth, tied a rope to it that went over the pulley and down to the floor, and he went down, and the two of them, Dr. DeSoto and his wife, turned the winch, and the rope got tighter and tighter and tighter until pop, out came the tooth, and quickly Dr. DeSoto ran up the ladder and stuffed some gauze in the fox's mouth to stop the bleeding. Well, then they waited for the fox to wake up. And eventually the fox did wake up, and Dr. DeSoto said, now you're going to be a little bit groggy. We will work on making this gold tooth. I took the measurements. It's going to fit just fine. Come back tomorrow morning at about 10 o'clock and I'll put it in. And the fox said, oh, thank you, thank you. And he sort of groggily went over and down the stairs and out the door. And as the fox was walking home, he thought, would it be shabby of me to eat the dentist and his wife after they fix my tooth? I'll have to think about that. Meanwhile, back at the dentist office, they were making this tooth. And as they were making the tooth and polishing it and getting it the right size, Dr. DeSoto said, I think I may have made a mistake letting this fox come in because I did not like what he was dreaming, what he was saying. And the wife said, I agree. We made a mistake. Foxes are just evil, evil animals. You can't trust them at all. Let's not let them in. And Dr. DeSoto said, no, I can't do that. Once I start a job, I have to finish a job. That's what I learned. My parents taught me, you've got to finish what you start. So that night when they went to bed, they just couldn't sleep. They were worried and worried about what they could do until finally they got an idea, talked about it, and then went to sleep. So the next morning, 10 o'clock, the fox rings the doorbell, and Dr. DeSoto looks down, sees him, pushes the button to let him in. The fox runs up the stairs. He's feeling much better today. He's not in pain. He sits down on the floor and opens his mouth wide. So Dr. DeSoto brings the ladder over. He climbs up, steps in to take out the gauze, and wham, the fox closes his mouth on him and then opens his mouth. Ha, 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 ha. Just kidding. And Dr. DeSoto said, don't joke around here. I'm serious and doing important business. No fooling around. And so then the fox saw Dr. DeSoto's wife carrying the golden tooth over to her. And it was beautiful. And she gave it to Dr. DeSoto, and and he put the tooth in the fox's mouth and fastened it in so it would stay, and then stepped out of the fox's mouth and said, now, close your mouth and clench your teeth, see if it fits right, and see how it feels. So the fox did that. And as he did that, he thought, you know what? I think I am going to eat these two. It would be a great way to break in the new tooth. And so he said, the fox said out loud, oh, it feels wonderful. Thank you. Good, said Dr. DeSoto. Now I have one more thing to talk to you about. My wife and I have recently developed a treatment for the teeth that would prevent you from ever getting a cavity or a toothache again for the rest of your life. Would you like us to do the treatment on your teeth? And the fox, who didn't like any kind of pain at all, said, oh, yes, 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 please. And so Mrs. DeSoto brought over a bucket with a paintbrush, handed it to Dr. DeSoto. He climbed up the ladder and told the fox to open his mouth, and he started painting the fox's teeth. And down below, Mrs. DeSoto was pointing out places that the dentist missed, and the fox was thinking about how good those mice were going to taste and how wonderful it would be to use his new tooth that way. And then Dr. DeSoto stepped out and he said, now close your mouth tightly for 60 seconds. And so the fox did what he was told. And Dr. DeSoto said, now, after 60 seconds, the formula will have soaked into your teeth and will be doing its job to prevent any more cavities or toothaches ever again. And so the fox waited and waited when the 60 seconds was up, because he was looking at the clock. He tried to open his mouth and he couldn't. It was glued shut. And Dr. DeSoto saw the surprised look on the fox's mouth, and on the fox's face, and he said, oh, I forgot to tell you, you won't be able to open your mouth for about 6 to 8 hours, but then you will be able to open your mouth after that, and the treatment will last you the rest of your life. No more tooth decay or rotten teeth again. And the fox didn't know what to do. He couldn't eat them. He couldn't even open his mouth. And so he was stunned, and he said, thank you very much. He got up and he walked over to the stairs, walked down the stairs and out the door. And Dr. DeSoto and Mrs. DeSoto looked at each other and said, well, today we have outfoxed the fox.
That's good, John.
Okay, let me take the spotlight off me. Back here. So, do you have a story, Chris? Okay. Okay. All right. You're gonna have a phone, and I'll put the spotlight back on. Okay. Spotlight for everyone. Make sure you're in the window there.
Okay. I don't know who wrote this poem, but it's something I've had since I was in high school. And it goes like this. Isn't it strange that kings and queens and clowns that dance in sawdust rings and common folk like you and me are creators of eternity? And each has given a book of rules and a bag of tools, and each must make, ere their life has flown, a stumbling block or a climbing stone.
All right. Thank you. Okay, remove spotlight. Turn it around. I think it should be back on speaker. Okay, so I printed out and forgot to bring a treasurer's report about the festival. And I thought maybe I could just, I kind of remember what the results of the storytelling festival were. We actually made $275. So we now have a total in our bank account of 991. That's more than enough to pay for the domain name renewal this summer and the NSN affiliate membership, which is $100. We just need to keep the balance above 500 so there are no service charges. So we're in good shape financially, and I think the storytelling, the Story Swap Festival was a big success. And I'm trying to see if I can remember the numbers. I think there were 20 people who paid $20 registration for the whole day. There were 8 that paid, that was the pre-registration deal. There were 8 that paid $25 for the day, and we had 17 people who showed up for the end of the day concert. And those tickets were $10 each. So that's how we pulled the money in. And we also got a very generous donation from the Storytellers of San Diego, $200.
And I found out why they had so much money.
Why?
Because the Storytellers of San Diego actually have several paid gigs where they get paid on a regular basis to have storytellers show up to increase people who are buying food and drink at a place.
Uh-huh.
And so they actually have more money than me.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's a nice problem.
Yes, and so they're currently doing the one that's at the cider and mead place.
Yeah.
The deal changed as far as how much money they get, but they were getting quite a bit of money for that on a regular basis and paying part of that to the tellers who were there,
Yeah.
and the rest of it goes into the organization funds.
Uh-huh.
And even though the deal has changed, it's still very affordable for them because now the money they make is actually based on the sales of food and drink that evening.
Oh, okay. So they get a cut of the business.
Yes, they basically get a cut of the business on the night when you're telling. And presumably the more people who are there for the storytelling and eating and drinking, the more money they make for the storytelling.
And they must be bringing in more people or the establishment wouldn't continue.
Right, because people come there for that because it's apparently just a fun place anyway. But on a weeknight, they're not normally all that busy. But it's a place that sells older, mainly alcoholic beverages. Cider and hard cider and mead are the mainstays of the drinks there. And it's done up as kind of a pseudo Viking hall. And apparently it's a lot of fun.
I think they do those on Thursday nights.
Mm-hmm. And then the other one that they do is at a smaller place, like a coffee place that's in Ocean Beach. And I don't know if they make money from that or just off of tips or something. But apparently they make money. And for the festival that they run in the spring, they've got grant money coming out of their ears to pay for that. So they don't have to use their funds for their own festival.
Right.
But they're already scheduling their next San Diego Storytelling Festival. It'll be mid-March of next year in Coronado. Because apparently the Coronado Library loves them, and they didn't have to jump through the hoops that they had been having to jump through with one of the county libraries, which is where they started out.
Yeah, the Encinitas one.
Yes. Apparently it only worked while the one librarian was there to do all the jumping through hoops for them. But since Coronado is just a one library system with a city council that thinks this is a wonderful thing to have there, they can do pretty much whatever they want in Coronado.
Chris and I went this year. It's a nice library.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is. It's a fairly wealthy community. It always has been. But anyway, it's going to be in mid-March again next year.
Right. Yeah, they always do it in March. It's a little longer drive than Encinitas was.
Yes.
For us.
Well, for almost anybody in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But it's a lovely place. And even if you don't want to stay at one of the overpriced hotels in Coronado, it's not that far away from some of the ones that are cheaper.
Yeah, we didn't stay in Coronado.
we found it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very reasonably so. But anyway, I was down there for the Sam Hinton Festival a couple of weeks ago
Yeah.
because I had talked to Marilyn McPhee about it at the Story Swapping Festival. And I said I would try to get there. I couldn't commit until the train started running again. And the reason is the people in San Clemente have built everything too close to the edge of the hills.
Oh,
And so even the historic places in San Clemente are endangered because they were built too close to the edge of the hills. Everybody wanted the view over into the ocean, even if there's nothing under it to support it. So when the hillside started sliding, it slid down onto the railroad tracks twice this last year. 2 days after I got back from the Sam Hinton Festival, it happened again. And this big rock ended up in the middle of the train tracks.
wow.
It didn't hit one of the trains, but the train had to back up, back to the next station. And it's still not reopened again because they have to fix that hillside. And the San Clemente people were going, but it's so pretty.
Well, yeah, because if a big rock comes down while the train's there, it could kill people.
Yes. And just having it come down on the tracks was unpleasant because
Yeah.
there was literally a train on the way north that had to back up to Oceanside, I guess.
Glad it did it then instead of when you were coming.
Well, yes, there's that too. But I did discover that one of the most unusual restaurants that was near the Sam Hinton Festival. It was, I swear, a sushi and hard kombucha restaurant. Yes, if you take kombucha and let it keep fermenting until there's more alcohol in it, that's apparently become a thing.
That's powerful stuff. Did
Well,
you have some?
no, actually, I had just the regular kombucha that was not taken all the way to that fermented. But they have quite a following there that love some of the flavors. It's like, I don't think I want that. But it was the one that basically has just a trace of alcohol, which is the normal kombucha, was interesting enough, and it made an interesting counterpoint to the sushi.
Yeah.
But it was a sushi and hard kombucha are the specialties.
Wow.
And they have multiple flavors on the night, of course, because they have to run it out of the taps. And they can tell when it's going bad because even hard kombucha, if it goes a little too far, it changes color.
It comes in.
Well, it's sort of like vinegar sludge if it keeps going.
Yeah.
All right.
Because I saw them have to take one of the taps out of service when they've gone a little too far. Because apparently they use it in a form that just keeps fermenting while it's in there. They don't stop it. They just use it quickly.
Wow.
But anyway, as a result of doing the Sam Hinton Festival and performing there, I'm now a member of the Storytellers of San Diego. It's not as distinctive as having been a member of the Storytellers in the Midwest the way I was for a while.
Yeah.
But it's the same reason, because if you aren't a member and you perform with them in a paying gig, you can use your pay to become a member.
Oh, okay. Or you can just pay a membership fee and become a member.
I could do that too, but
Yeah.
this is more interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So now I've done that with 3 organizations because I thought I rejoined SAC.
oh, because you told at the genre.
Right.
I am going to tell at the September genre SAC Zoom event because I found somebody to take my place the 3rd Wednesday in September. Every 3rd Wednesday, I've been hosting a Zoom meeting for Sierra Club. And so I saw that September, the genre was folktales, and that's what I do. I do folktales mostly. And so I found somebody to take my place. So I've already signed up.
Good.
Where does SAC get its money from?
I'm not sure. I mean, they get membership money from all the members, and I guess they do have
They must have a
fees for
grant
some
or
of them.
something.
they have fees that they charge for some of the stuff, but I don't know how that works.
Yeah. And they don't charge groups like ours an affiliate dues like NSN does.
Right. But they charge individuals who want to join SAC.
Right.
So that's where part of it comes from. I
Yeah.
think.
I'm a member. I think I have to renew this fall.
And NSN wants people to renew their individual memberships. They're reaching out.
Yeah, I know. They reached out to me saying that I hadn't, but I had, and I sent them the receipt.
Right.
Any other announcements?
Not unless you have the announcement of what this month's SAC thing is, because I don't know what it is.
I don't know. And I'm not going to be able, I actually am not going to be able to watch it at all. Chris and I are leaving for the East Coast next Tuesday. So I don't know what it is. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Pass the message.